Hello Year 8. Obviously you don't have me today for a cover lesson because you're having a cover lesson, but I wanted to teach you the lesson anyway. So today's lesson is about the rock cycle, and the first thing I'd like you to do is watch this, look at this image and tell me, what can you tell me already about the rocks in the Grand Canyon, which is in America? Do you know anything about how they were formed and what type they are? If your teacher can just press pause now and maybe get some feedback from you, and then you can watch the video after, which tells you all about it.
Pretty awesome, isn't it? The Grand Canyon is one of the most spectacular natural wonders on Earth. 277 miles long, 18 miles wide at its widest, and more than a mile deep into Earth's crust. And unlike the Great Wall of China, you can actually see it from space. All of the water in all of the world's rivers would only fill it halfway. It almost defies belief. The Colorado River, the river that made this canyon, is only about 100 meters wide. That's not very big as rivers go. The Mississippi, the Amazon are far, far bigger, and they've never made anything like this. So, how did it happen? No one was around to see it form, but its story is written in all of those beautiful rock layers. Geologists are kind of like time-traveling detectives. They look for fingerprints here and there, retrace the footsteps to retell Earth's story as best as we can. Now, the Native American people in this area call this canyon Kaibab, which means mountain lying down or upside down mountain. And they didn't know how right they were, because down there at the bottom of the canyon, the oldest rocks are mountains.
The oldest rocks at the bottom of the canyon are named after the Hindu god Vishnu. About 1.8 billion years ago, the area that's now the Grand Canyon was covered in mountains taller than the Himalayas. But over hundreds of millions of years, erosion wore them down into hills just tens of meters tall.
From this point on, the evolution of the Grand Canyon doesn't happen in a dry desert like you see today. It happens underwater. Ancient oceans filled this area from 1 billion years ago to as recently as 80 million years ago. That water would rise and fall and rise and fall again, depositing sand and mud and even ancient seashells, compressing them into rock, piling layer upon layer and creating this colorful layer cake just waiting to be cut. But you might notice we're not at sea level right now. About 70 or 80 million years ago, this whole area took a tectonic elevator ride straight up, creating this high plateau. But there was still no river and no canyon. But northeast of here, that same uplift created the Rocky Mountains and their snow-covered peaks.
Melting snow began to flow and pool up in this area. Small rivers joined together to make larger ones, some pooled up into lakes, some even changed direction. And about 5 or 6 million years ago, the Colorado River was born.
That's not that old in geological time, but this river is special. It drops 10 feet for every mile that it travels and carries 500,000 tons of silt and sand and rocks downstream every day. It's like liquid sandpaper. It cut the plateau backwards, the same way that a waterfall wears away at a cliff, cutting this mile-deep scar like a hot knife through butter.
Excuse me, we're wondering, where's the Grand Canyon?
Do you know where? We're trying to find, the Grand Canyon.
Here's an idea.
Oh!
It's easy to know.
So that's how it got deep. But how did the canyon get so wide? Well, gravity took over, rain and ice chipping away at the canyon walls, and as it fell, it was carried downstream. Fossils and rocks from this area have even been found downstream almost as far as the Gulf of California.
And that's pretty much how we got the canyon of today. If you want to turn a mountain upside down, all you need is time. This canyon's still changing. It's getting deeper and wider, and as we continue to study it, the story of this canyon will change too. There's stories like this locked in Earth's crust all over the planet, hidden from view. But that little river has opened this one to us. Stay curious.
So hopefully through that video you were able to see how like the rocks and the water actually shaped what the rocks were doing and how that changes over time. And you can actually have very, very old rocks. So really exciting there. So the idea for today is, the title is the rock cycle. I want you to be able to know and be able to describe the different types of rock there are. be able to explain how the different types of rock are formed, and I want you to be able to link together the creation of different types of rock in the rock cycle. So if we just have a look at this image here, this image shows you some different types of rock, or the three main types of rock that we talk about. So here we've got igneous, sedimentary and metamorphic. Now if you have a look at the images, what I'd like you teacher to do is just pause the video here, maybe just get some feedback about how the groups are different to each other. Okay, so some of the ideas you might have come up with are, in sedimentary you often get this like banding. That's because sedimentary rock builds up over years and years, and it's layer upon layer and upon layer of rock and sediment being washed on top of each other and then being compacted down. So you get this sort of layering effect, and you can see here it can sometimes trap quite large pieces of rock, and you get these large different areas, and you probably see that sedimentary rock like this sandstone is often quite soft, so even though it's you know, it's a solid, you can actually feel it maybe rubbing a little bit when you, especially with like the chalk, because we obviously use that to write on blackboards and things. Then you've got igneous rock here. So igneous rock is formed by the cooling of magma on the surface of the earth, and if it cools quickly you get these quite small crystals, but if it cools slowly then you get quite large crystals, and the size of the crystals can give you an idea of how the rock was actually formed. So you get this quite crystalline structure here. And then metamorphic rock is actually made of sedimentary or igneous rock, and it's when that rock gets compacted under the ground and changed due to heat and pressure. So you can see here this slate was actually probably made from some sort of sedimentary rock, because it's still got the layering, but you can see how the pressure from the earth has changed the shape there. The layers are not flat. Same with this one. And here you can see the schist has what looks like crystals in it, but those crystals have been compacted by heat and pressure in the earth. So you get these different types here. So what I'd like your teacher to do now, well, I'm just going to play you this video and you can watch it. This video is here for you to watch again after if you want to, but just have a look and think about how are the different types of rock made.
Hello everybody, it's me, Mr. Bradley, and today we're learning about rocks. But before we begin, hit that subscribe button and get ready to do the starter questions on your screen right now. Rocks can be organized into 3 separate categories depending on how they were formed: igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary. The first kind of rock we're going to learn about is sedimentary rock.
On top of mountains, it can get pretty windy and rainy. And did you know that this wind and rain can chip away tiny pieces of rocks and dirt away from the mountain? These tiny pieces of rocks and dirt are carried by water down streams to rivers, finally reaching oceans and lakes where they sink down to the bottom. We call these tiny rocks and dirt that sink down to the bottom sediment. Over time, more rocks and dirt sink on top of them, then more sink on top of them, then more on top of them. After a long time,
1 million, zillion, jillion, dillion, cotillion times later,
things start to get heavy for the rocks and dirt at the very bottom. These layers are squeezed together harder and harder until eventually sedimentary rock is formed.
Now using these starbursts, I'm going to show you the rock cycle. So now I'm just going to cut up the starburst into tiny little rocks, which we'll then use to make our sedimentary rock. Okay, so our sedimentary rock has now been formed. This has been made of many smaller pieces of rocks and dirt, all squeezed together to form one hard rock. Sometimes these layers of rocks and dirt can be very clearly seen within the sedimentary rock formation.
Although all rocks are pretty hard, sedimentary rock is probably the weakest out of the 3 types of rocks.
Examples of sedimentary rock include sandstone, mudstone, limestone, shale, and even coal, which we learnt at a coal mine we visited here in Ireland.
Hello, I'm here at Arigna Mining Experience to learn about a very special kind of sedimentary rock called coal.
So we're just here in Arigna mine, deep under the ground. And here is where coal is mined. Above me is layers and layers and layers of rock. Very, very heavy. You can see how it compress and squash down that sedimentary rock to make coal.
Let's check out some incredible sedimentary rock formations.
And the next type of rock we're going to learn about is metamorphic rock. Sometimes these layers of rocks and dirt deep underground become close to molten hot magma.
To add a little bit of heat to this rock, I'm going to use a hairdryer.
The heat of the magma combined with the huge pressure of all of the layers of rocks above can cause the rocks at the bottom to be chemically changed into metamorphic rock. But this also takes a super long time.
Here's some footage of me climbing on metamorphic rock on a mountaineering course in India.
The next type of rock we're going to learn about is igneous rock. Igneous rock is formed when rocks become so hot that they melt and turn to liquids. We call them molten rocks. Molten rock that is underground is called magma, and molten rock that comes out of the ground is called lava. When the magma or lava cools down again, it hardens and forms igneous rock. Take a look at my starburst. When I heat them, they begin to melt and form molten rock. Then, when they cool down again, they harden to form igneous rock. Then, once again, over a super long time, this igneous rock is chipped away by the wind and rain. These tiny pieces of rocks and dirt are then once again carried away by the water from streams to rivers to lakes and oceans, where they sink down to the bottom. And the cycle begins all over again. We call this the rock cycle.
Hi guys, I'm here at the Giant's Causeway. The Giant's Causeway was formed around 60 million years ago when molten hot magma erupted from a nearby volcano and quickly cooled down as it reached the ocean, forming these amazing honeycomb pillars. These pillars are made from basalt, which is an igneous rock. Other igneous rocks include granite and pumice.
Recap time!
There are three main types of rocks: sedimentary, metamorphic, and igneous rock. Sedimentary rock is formed when layers of rocks and dirt are squeezed together under huge pressure for a long time. Metamorphic rocks are formed when rock layers become close to magma. The heat and pressure over a long time forms metamorphic rocks. Igneous rock is formed when molten hot rocks cool down and harden again.
And so we've come to the end of our video about rocks. Enjoyed learning about rocks? Then make sure you don't miss out on my fossil hunting video.
Hi, so I hope you enjoyed that and it gave you a little bit more of an insight into igneous rocks, metamorphic rocks and sedimentary rocks. Now what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you a worksheet which I will just show for you here. 1 second. So it's just going to open up now. Okay, so you can see that this here. So we've got here the life story of a rock. So you've got igneous, weathering, erosion, edges, pressure, compaction, sedimentation, glue, crystallize, and fossils. And here you've got heat, metamorphic, settle, freeze, thaw, and squeeze. So these are all keywords that you can use. And you're gonna imagine you're a large fragment of rock. Here you are up here at the top of the mountain, and you're close to breaking away from your mountain. And your task is to write about what happens to you in your journey to the bottom of the sea. And the following guidelines might help you. So you can sort of answer these questions as you go along. So you can write it as a story, or you can write it as a cartoon, or whatever you want to do. It's up to you. You could just write it as a series of answers. I don't mind. So what type of rock are you at the top? How are you going to break off the mountain? What do they look like? What was it like falling down the mountain, falling into smooth pieces? How did you end up in the river? Then what happened to you in the river? Did you have any friends? Did you change into sediment? How did you feel trapped? Was it painful? And then at the end, sort of going now into the sea, what was it like eventually getting to the sea? Did you enjoy being squished together with the other sediment? What was it like being with the other sediment for millions of years? What type of rock are you now? What conditions made you like this? What are your plans for the future? And how do you think you'll get there? So you can probably see here, we're looking at moving through perhaps being an igneous rock, through to making into a sedimentary rock, and then thinking about the future maybe being a metamorphic rock as you move deeper down under the sea into the crust of the earth. On the back, there is also a exam question, and I'd like you to do that at the end, please. Okay, and I will quickly record you a little video of the answers in case you've got time to answer the exam question at the end and mark it. So complete the exam question. At the end of the lesson, if there's time, you can play the video at the end to find your to mark it. Now, your story will probably take you longer than the time you've got, so try and get the first two sections done first, and then you can finish it for homework, and I'll set it on Show My Homework for you. Okay, so yeah, hope you enjoy it. If you get stuck, remember you've got those keywords. And you can also use your Caboodle book, look for the page on the rock cycle, and that will have lots of pointers for you. Right, have a lovely rest of the lesson, and remember, if you've got time at the end, you can just watch the end of this video, which has got the answers to the exam question. Hi, just going to go through these exam answers with you. So if we have a look, igneous rock such as granite can become sedimentary rock. A model for this process is shown in the following sequence. You've got pieces of granite and dilute hydrochloric acid. Half fill a plastic jar with pieces of granite and dilute acid. Leave for 1 week and then pour off the acid. Then shake the jar vigorously for a few minutes. Then sieve the contents of the jar into a dish of water. Leave the dish to stand for a few hours. Then press the wet fine material for many weeks with heavy weights. Step 1 represents chemical weathering in the rock cycle. What part of the rock cycle is represented by step 2? So step 2 is shaking the jar vigorously for a few minutes. So that would be erosion. So the breaking off of the parts of the rock, okay? Number 2, the river carries the pieces of granite from a mountain to the sea. Describe 2 ways in which the pieces of granite change. So they will become smaller and more rounded. Which 2 parts of the rock cycle are represented by step 4 and 5? So step 4, leave the dish to sand. That's where you're waiting for the sediment to settle. So that's called sedimentation or deposition. Then step 5, pressing the wet fine material. So that is going to be compaction or compression. Okay, give yourself a mark out of 5 for me, and I'll ask you next lesson what you've got. Thank you. Have a lovely day.